Good afternoon. My name is Ann Wood, and I'm the president of the PAM Great Lakes region. And we are delighted to have a presentation for you today on liturgical art. Dave VanderMeer, who is our vice president, is going to moderate this discussion. He and Ellen Phillips, one of the other presenters, are the visual artists in residence for the Montreat conferences this summer. So I'm very excited to have all of you here with us. Please know that you can put questions in the question and answer or in the chat, and I will be watching those carefully so that we can see that they get addressed before the end of the conference. Dave?
Thanks, Ann. As Ann said, I'm Dave VanderMeer, Minister of Music and Fine Arts at First Presbyterian Church of Ann Arbor, the Vice President of the Great Lakes PAM region and former president of PAM. So I'll be your moderator today for our panelists. I'd like to introduce each of them, and then they can say a little bit about themselves, and then we'll dive into some presentations, and then we'll begin some questions that I'll ask each of the panelists. So glad you all are here and welcome. So Ellen Phillips is from Black Mountain, North Carolina.
Yes. Am I on? There I am. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm just fooling around with this computer. I'm sorry. Anyway, David, for some reason, I have your picture and not mine.
That's all right. Just keep talking.
Just keep talking. Okay. Well, all right. I've been an artist all of my life, and a couple of decades ago, I sort of stumbled into learning about liturgical art. I had never really known about that, and learned that liturgical art is art for the use for worship. It's not decoration, not to make everything pretty, but it's to enhance the worship experience, just like music does, hopefully. So I'm going to take you to my website, which is ellenphillipsart.com. And here are some samples of what I have done before. I'll talk a little bit about my process. What I do is in an ideal world, I go to the church, wherever it is. I have a visit first, and then I'm able to see the church itself. And then when I do the design, if possible, I'll work various motifs that are in the architecture of the sanctuary, or I've even used some of the print designs off of carpets. And sorry, I'm still fooling around with this computer. So that each piece I do is unique to the location. For example, this one on the long column on the bottom right, that worked because it was a church in the round. And so we actually were able to hang a circular holder up there and hang that. That's a World Communion banner, hang that in the middle of it, the round part. The other thing is that for me, creating these is a spiritual practice. Typically, these banners are made to celebrate a season, a particular date, or liturgical season. And so I ask for the scripture first, and then I just live with that. It's just on my mind. And it's always amazing to see the designs that are shown to me. And then we'll talk about the paper lace banners. With those, I will create a pattern. Now, I can certainly cut the pattern in my studio and send a completed banner, but it's a lot more fun if I can make a pattern and send it to the church or take it to the church. And then the people come and they actually cut the banners so it really becomes theirs. And they literally have a hand in the art that's going to be going up in the sanctuary. So I think I might just stop right there because I know we're going to have some question and answers later. So let me figure out how to stop share and
Great.
we'll talk later.
Thank you, Ellen. Next, I'd like to introduce Lisa Longo.
Let me share my screen and introduce myself. There. So my name is Lisa Longo, and I am. Okay, I'm a worship artist and lay worship artist, and my profession is nonprofit management and fundraising. Passion of mine is creating visual art that enhances worship experience at Northminster Presbyterian Church in Indianapolis, which is where I currently serve as one of two of an informal co-chair of worship art. And Mary Boris, who's in the picture you see on your screen, is the other partner of mine. She's a trained nurse, but also a crafter and a quilter. And my kind of experience coming to this would be scrapbooking and cross stitch and just general crafting that I have enjoyed. I began attending the Montreat Worship and Music Conference in 2012, and I've only missed 2 of them. And most of the techniques we've learned there or online that we've taught ourselves. And I'm going to share with you some of the things that we've done in the last several years. So let's see. Get to my next screen here. Okay. There we go. This here is some paper cuts that we did in, let's see, 2020. There were 4, and they're identical banners that are mirror images of each other, and we put one up each week during Advent. The process that we use at Northminster is we tend to have a worship planning meeting maybe several weeks prior to several months prior to the season. And we will meet with the pastors, the worship staff, the music staff, and the lay worship leadership. And we will talk about, we'll read the scriptures, we'll talk about images that come to mind, we'll talk about themes that we might like to see during the season. And then Mary and I will take that notes from that meeting and work to create art that fits with the season. And here you can see a close-up of one of those paper cuts and just the hand-drawn design that I used to make that. And then you can see what we did on the communion table with ribbons. We used purple and blue during Lent and then added green, red, and silver for Christmas Eve. Here is what we did for Christmas 2021 and for Advent. We added a swag of dyed silk each week. We started with the darkest. Our theme was moving dark to light, and we started with the darkest one, and then each week added to that throughout the season, and then added the white kind of tulle here with lights in it on Christmas Eve. This is a banner we did for Lent 2021. It's a fabric collage. The picture at the right in the upper corner is the kind of inspiration we got from Pinterest. We found that on Pinterest and we used that to make our banner. We wanted to do something that was more modern, so we made a modern hiker and a more green in our picture. But we the one is Road to Emmaus is what the title of the original painting is, and then ours was just, we were doing a hiking journey kind of theme. This is a technique that Mary learned through getting some online, just watching some videos on how to do fabric collage. But we had so much fun doing that banner. This is a painted canvas banner. We had The Camino de Santiago Trail was part of our reference point for our Lent series. And so we took the actual passport that they use for that, or one of the older versions of it, and made that, and then did stamps that each week correlated to whatever was talked about during the sermon. So we made these. This is an example of one of the stamps right here in the middle. And this would be probably 14 inches by 16 inches in size. And then we painted on it and took the banner down each week and made a stamp on the banner. And that was really a lot of fun to do. Lots of work, but lots of fun. These are some additional banners we've done. The ones on the left are painted silk, and that was a technique we learned at Montreat that we then took to home with us. We did a workshop with some members of our congregation and developed 4 other ones that some members of the congregation did, and then those are the 2 that Mary and I did for Christmas Eve. The center banner is made to look like stained glass. And then the one on the right is sun-dyed. The handprints are sun prints, and those handprints are actual handprints from members of our congregation that we had put on cardboard and then cut out and then used them when we dyed the fabric outside. This is an example of things that you can use that aren't necessarily considered art supplies. We did this bread display for World Communion Sunday, and we had some of the breads that were purchased and some were made by some of our members. And this is where we used mostly live plants. We've got 2 banners in the back, but mostly live plants for our Easter worship service. And this is an art space at our congregation that is in our gathering place. It consists of 7 1-inch shelving units. They're designed so that you can slide a 10 by 10 canvas in them. We've used all different kinds of things, but a 10 by 10 canvas is what we were originally thinking of. And this project we did for our 75th anniversary, and we asked each family or individuals or groups of people in the church to create a 10 by 10 canvas of what Northminster meant to them. And so you can see we've added a few additional ones in the mix, but most of these tiles were made by our congregation members. And it was a lot of fun to get people involved in that project. And here's another couple ways we've used that space. The picture on the left is, again, some painted. Then each candle is 9 10 by 10s painted together, and then they were put in that display space, and we added the star on Christmas. And then the one on the right is a paper cut with a gold lame behind it to make it shimmery, but it's just paper cut on black. And that was, again, I think, done for Advent. And then this is something we did in Advent. We put originally the doors were closed, and there were 4 of them on windows in our, kind of as you enter our church. And each week of Advent, we opened to reveal a different angel. And you can see it from outside at night. It really lit up well. So this is a paper cut with tissue paper in between it to give it that stained glass look. These are all projects that we've done in the last 10 years at our church, but I didn't share some of the ones that were not, there are some that were not great projects. They ended up being kind of ones that didn't look as good as we wanted it or something, but I think we've learned from each one of them along the way, and have enjoyed doing the art projects, and I look forward to having a conversation as we go through this seminar.
Thank you, Lisa. Did you stop sharing, Lisa? Because I can't.
I did stop share. Did it not take?
Here it goes. Thank you. So I'm going to share with you a few things from Central Presbyterian Church in Atlanta, where I served, and now at First Presbyterian Church here in Ann Arbor. So those are paper lace banners that Ellen designed for us, but our congregation made them. And she mentioned about the architecture at the top and bottom of the banners. All of that pattern is taken from the Reredas, where the cross is up front in the chancel. And we now have 3 years of paper lace banners for each year, A, B, and C of the lectionary. This was a project that we had our congregation fold origami cranes during the pandemic. And we folded over 3,500 with people's names written on each of the cranes. And people offered prayers for those people and then folded them. And then we collected them and strung them up. World Communion. Some Advent candles from Central Presbyterian. A little closer shot, paper lace. At Central, we had a vestibule before you went up a story to the sanctuary. So we had created art for the walls when you entered the church to give a hint of what season it was. We also invited congregational members to bring in nativities from around the world and put those in the windows. This is a project that that Wright Pittman designed, but we painted and collected over 6 to 8 months of bottle caps, and then we spray painted coffee lids, sour cream lids, and created this design. It was kind of like glue by number, or paint by number, so to speak. But again, the community is involved in the project. That's the whole goal, is to invite your church members to participate. That was the finished product that we hung. That's for explanation. We used that was based on the hymn "While We Are Waiting, Come" from Glory to God. One of our youth invited our committee to be engaged in creating stars for Advent through Epiphanies. So we made origami stars out of recycled bulletins. And we were just inundated with a whole bunch of stars. Some beautiful pyramids that are quilted. Paper lace that Ellen designed when we were at Central. This is Ellen's paper lace as well, Madonna and Child. It's back to First Pres. Back to Central on Epiphany. So Ellen created that star Epiphany banner that we hung along with the Moravian star. Some other pyramids. Ellen was the liturgical artist when I was the conference director in 2008. And a quilter from Central Presbyterian Church, Berta Irwin, quilted the pyramids. That was Lent. Berta Irwin made these pyramids. Again, that was in the vestibule. Person that does an incredible embroidery here at First Pres made these Lenten pyramids. Easter close up. Beth Taylor is the artist who now lives in Schenectady, New York. Designed these beautiful pyramids at Central. And she designed this quilted piece as well, but it has quotes from the Taizé community, from the songs that are embedded on the fabric. This was for Pentecost. So a dove frame and then orange, red, and yellow folded origami birds. Another quilt of Beth. At Central, we had this beautiful woodwork of the Trinity. So we just took red cardstock and did that inset in the dark wood, and it just popped. And very simple, just use painter's tape to insert them. Actually, one of our custodians created these banners for Pentecost. Some ribbon banners that Joe Murkison created. Joan also wove this for Pentecost, the paraments. It's a fun project, but very detailed. Takes a lot of time, patience. Keep flying through these. We also, in year B of the lectionary, in the Gospel of John talks about bread images. And so we had these different displays of bread during those 5 Sundays. Berta Irwin created these. This was an interesting project for our stewardship theme one year, right, Ellen? Ellen had this great idea, but they are coffee, help me. Filters, right. 3 different sizes, and she dyed them, and then we strung them, and we have purple balloons. You can't really see that, and those purple balloons are tied onto it as well, and then the green vines. So looking like wisteria. World Communion fabrics. That's Ellen's. This was, again, World Communion. This was at Mo Ranch Worship and Music Conference. Painted paint sticks hung by a little string to create the whole liturgical year from Advent through ordinary time. Conference was extraordinary time. These are Ellen's paper lace that when Central celebrated their 150th anniversary were created. I'm going to stop that, and then I'm going to turn this over to Sandra.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sandra McDonald. I'm a retired Presbyterian minister, and I'm a retired bunch of other things too. Seems like I don't stay retired very well. And in the latter part of my life, I have become interested in art, particularly as it is used in publications of the church, church bulletins and other documents that you were always putting together for one thing or another. I found a lot of resources and gotten more comfortable choosing art for worship as I've been involved over the last 10 or 15 years. And so that is what I'm going to talk about. And first, I want to say some words, and then I'm going to show you some pictures. We have such an opportunity to make the art on our Sunday morning worship bulletins have meaning and communicate to the congregation in a different way, because we can choose art that is directly matched to the text. And there are way more resources than you might think are available for that. It needs the art to be a meaningful part of worship needs to be based on the text, and that means if you're the one producing the bulletin art or locating the bulletin art, it's pretty important that you have the text far enough in advance that you can find good art for the particular text of the day. Much of the classical art, the famous art that you think of when you think about classical artists, much of that is in the public domain and is free to use. Not all of it, but much of it. Contemporary art by current artists, is for the most part still under copyright, but all the artists that I have interacted with have been willing to share their work and do it in a very reasonable way. I'm going to give you a list of resources in just a minute, but I practically never get told no when I contact an artist about using art for a particular Sunday on a bulletin. And many churches have artist members. You've seen work done by members of churches from all the prior presenters. It can be a wonderful blessing to have artists in your church, and it also can have some pitfalls. I was listening to what Lisa had to say about some projects not coming out quite as well as they'd hoped. That's a learning experience, but you have to, when it's church members, you handle that gingerly. You don't want to say, well, that just won't do. So you need to work together with your committees to be sure you get into a project that's within the grasp of the people you're asking to do it. And there is a downside, because if you are going to put art that you select for the text on your church bulletins, the bulletins almost have to be printed in color. Otherwise, you're restricted to black and white art, and that's probably not what you would want to choose. The number one resource for someone producing church bulletins with art is surely the Vanderbilt Divinity Library. They have thousands and thousands of images available. They are, for the most part, free. There are very, very few exceptions. The copyright is taken care of, and the steps you have to follow to get permission to use them are clearly written out, and the diversity of the collection is astounding. They have, again, famous classical art, they have contemporary artists, they have calligraphy, they have photography, they have every kind of art, sculpture, almost everything you can imagine. And the website is there on the slide, it's all organized by the lectionary, so if you're the one responsible for finding art for your church bulletins, it's laid right out for you. Another very good source is the Icons Gallery. Theirs are not free, you pay, but they're almost entirely contemporary artists who are still working at making a living with their art, and the rates are quite reasonable. And again, there's a diversity of styles available. And then working directly with the artists has worked very well for me. Again, I can't think of any situation where I've been told no, or that I've been given a price that was more than I felt like we could afford. If you're a PAM member, and you should be, one of your very best resources is Call to Worship. Beginning 2 years ago now, Call to Worship started including liturgical art. Call to Worship goes with your PAM membership, and it has all kinds of resources matched to the lectionary, readings and other liturgy, anthems, handbell music, and down here in the corner, art. And here's a little close-up. It's organized by each Sunday of the year, and there are 4 suggestions, and that's matched to all the scriptures for each week of each year in the 3-year lectionary cycle. So that is a wonderful resource. I'm just going to show you a few sample bulletins. These are both bulletins with art from contemporary artists. This one's the art that was done in 2010, and I don't have the year for this, but it is in this century. Another thing I've found really nice to do with bulletin art is over here on the one on the left, that is 7 parts of a mosaic, and I was able to use all 7 parts to tell the whole story. And the one over here on the right was for Reformation Sunday, and I had pictures or sculptures of 4 of the reformers as the bulletin art. These are, that's Marc Chagall, a very famous, world-renowned artist, and this is a quilt from a member of the congregation. So very different kinds of art on those two. The bullet on the left is for Children's Sabbath, and so we use children's art. And what I typically did was have children prepare art and then choose 4, or if I was really energetic, 6, and do 6 different versions of the bulletin cover. So 6 different kids got to see their work displayed for the whole church. The one on the right is similar, except that was a Youth Sunday and a little older artist. But the same process was used. So we had 4 different kids do art and then made 4 different bulletins that Sunday, each with a different cover. And these are 2 artists we've used quite a lot. I'm just showing them as further examples. The artist on the left is Jan Richardson, who her website is janrichardson.com. It's easy to locate. And she has art matched to the lectionary and also matched to liturgical themes of every sort. And on the right,
there's a fee for that, right, Sandra?
Right. If you use Jan Richardson, you can pay $15 for the image, or you can have a membership and use all the images you want for a whole year for $165. So it's pretty, if you're going to do it, it's pretty reasonable. And the one on the right is Hachi, who had a major association with PCUSA several years ago, was on the Easter calendar, and he is also very good to work with and willing to share his art at very reasonable prices. And then I just put 2 Christmas ones. John Stewart is actually a pastor who does art, and his website is johnstewart.com. And the artist on the right is from the Vanderbilt collection. He's a contemporary artist who, it's a different style. It's always bright, colorful, and abstract images. And then this one, the artist on the left is Lauren Wright Pittman, who's been a conference artist at Montreat and has a group of artists that work together in a company called Sanctified Art. And the bulletin on the right is Jan Richardson again. And I will be happy to answer questions when we get to that part of the program.
I think Kelly has a question from someone that's listening.
And go ahead and ask your question, Ann Brown.
Ann, are you there?
And you'll have to unmute yourself.
She's muted. She's still muted.
Oh, here she goes. Oh, It's muted again. While we're waiting for Ann to unmute, Ann Wood, do you have questions from the chat that you like answered?
Actually, I don't see anything that we haven't either had a response from other people in the chat about or had addressed here. People are asking about storing, particularly the paper lace banners, and questions about how you hung the origami cranes.
David, you might want to speak about storage. There's a lot to be said about storage.
Yeah, Ellen, I think, why don't you address about paper lace that you can roll them up?
You can roll them up. And then about a couple of weeks before you're going to use them, if there's a hallway or someplace where people are not going to be walking around, if you can unroll it, maybe weight them down with some books, they uncurl pretty well. Sometimes when there's little bitty cuts out like that, they'll stay a little curled, but that's okay. It gives it kind of a 3D look. Now, the ideal thing would be to have, you know, when you go to a rug and carpet store and they have those swinging rods that things are hanging from, that would be ideal. If you were to do that, you just have to make sure that the two little pieces don't get all tangled when they're together. But you can roll them. And I will say one more thing. They're pretty hardy. We've had some at Central. I think they were 15 years old. And if you want to, after some years, you have the actual banner and you have, so it's a pattern if you want to lay it down on top of a clean sheet of paper. This paper is photographic backdrop paper, and it's tough, like maybe watercolor, the 300-pound watercolor paper, but it hangs, it does well. They of course will yellow, but you're not going to notice that unless it's right up next to a new one. The other thing that's sort of nice about the paper lace banners is, one thing you really don't want is the same old forever and ever, and it's good for art to change. And so you use the banners until their life is over and then get something new. I think we all have seen tired felt banners that have been there for decades. The children that made it are in college or have children of their own. So there is an ephemeral quality to art that's a good thing.
There's a question about the paper itself. It comes from, you can Google Savage seamless paper, and it comes in different widths and length, and that's how you can purchase the photographic backdrop paper. And somebody asked, how do you cut them? You use X-Acto knives, and you get self-healing mats and put them on, you know, church banquet tables, 6-foot or 8-foot tables. Use self-healing mats, and then you cut X-Acto using X-Acto knives, the pattern. And you can go through 2 layers pretty well. 3 layers is really difficult, but 2 layers work better. And 1, of course, is very easy to cut.
We have another question in the chat about how churches hang banners at great heights.
Good question. You have to have a great maintenance supervisor that's willing to climb up into attics and help you. So at Central, there was actually an attic that the custodians could and facility manager could climb up into the attic, and then we used strong wires and things for the origami framework to come through the can lights in the sanctuary. At First Pres here in Ann Arbor is an A-framed structure. There is no attic. So I worked with an engineer from the University of Michigan School of Theater, Music and Dance to come over and figure out. And so he used this thick black rope. He put up a pulley system for us. So now we can do this all ourselves. And it was amazing. And the black, anything black, always when you're hanging things, black cording or black wires disappear. And so we put the framework up and then hung just safety pin the strings of origami birds to the rope.
Someone else asks if you've ever adorned the paper lace with sequins or glitter. Is the paper strong enough to support that? I would think yes.
Yes, definitely yes. And I have done that, and I think it's a great idea.
Deborah's asking if you can show us the rigging in your pictures, David. Is there a picture that has a good shot of that?
I think we could do that. But I think we should, Deborah, if we could have some other questions and answers of the panel, and then I'll try to show that and pull it up at the end, if that's all right.
We also have another question. Suggestions for paper lace in small churches with limited resources.
Exactly.
The paper itself is not at all expensive for. Oh, David, do you remember how long that roll is, or Lisa? It's
For paper lace?
Yeah. It's forever long.
Yeah, I think it was like.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I can't remember the.
So anyway, if you get the roll of paper from Savage, and it comes in, like David said, varieties of widths, that's not going to be expensive at all.
And we actually, I think, out of that big roll, cut 4 to 5, I believe. Mm-hmm. And those were, what, Ellen, 3 feet wide by 7 feet long.
Right.
So it covers a great deal.
And the labor is essentially, if you use church members to cut, there's no cost associated with that. It is an astoundingly beautiful product with a very small financial investment.
I see that Tom Trini has asked a really good question, wanting to know if there's an equation for the size of the paper lace pieces. And it has to be in proportion with the sanctuary. If it's a great big tall cathedral sanctuary, you need a pretty good size banner up there to be seen. It would look, you don't want a little silly looking thing up there. Flip side, if it's a smaller, more intimate sanctuary, you use smaller pieces. It just needs to be proportional. And you can, rather than one big banner, you can do like 3 narrow banners. There's all sorts of things that can be done.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to ask our panelists some further questions. Ellen, is art for worship different from art in your living room?
Yes, it absolutely is. Of course, as an artist, I never wanted to paint flowers that went with somebody's sofa anyway, but that's a lot of times what goes in your living room is to decorate, and which is a good thing. It makes us feel good when we walk into places. Art, and like I said earlier, liturgical art is used to enhance the worship experience. It does not have to be safe. It does not have to be trite. It can still make people think and wonder. And we've got 2,000 years worth of symbols and more, really, that can be incorporated in the design. So we can move beyond some of the things we see so frequently.
Can I say something too, David?
Sure.
There are people like me who are word people, and actually I'm a numbers person too, but not so much a visual person. But there are people very different from me, and all the words and chatter that goes on most of the time in our lives and in our churches doesn't speak to them at all the way the right piece of art speaks to them. And who's to say what the right piece of art is? But my point really is, I'm a word person, but I know people who react much more to the art in the sanctuary than the words that we hear in the sanctuary. And we know that as teachers, but we need to know it as worshipers too.
I have a question for Lisa. It seems to me that people have very different tastes in visual arts. How does that work in your church?
I would say, quite honestly, not everybody likes every piece that we do. And so our approach is that we will use a variety of different mediums. We'll use a variety of different colors, a variety of different styles. And so one installation might be a simpler, more thing. We'll get comments on that. And then one might be more complex. So the variety is the thing that's going to make people stay interested in it. The other thing is we don't really try to do a lot of interpretation for people. We let people do their own interpretation. And so it's nice to hear people come up and say, oh, I saw this. Oh, I saw that. Oh, I saw this. We aren't planting that. And so when you can, and if you can get them talking to each other about it, that's even better.
Right. Ellen, what if my congregation doesn't have artists? Can you still make art?
Absolutely. One of the things we've done, well, you saw that Lisa used the ribbons over the front of as a parament. We have swagged fabrics, as once again, Lisa, you had that done too. So these can be wonderful colors. And one of the best places I found to find colors, by the way, is in Atlanta, where there was a good sized Indian population. There were sari stores, not SORRY, but SARI. Sari stores, and they have brilliant colors and some polyester that's pretty inexpensive. But did that answer the question?
Yes. And the other thing I think of are smaller churches that don't have budgets. And like World Communion, I just invited the congregation to bring in fabrics from around the world. Mm-hmm. So that's one way that the congregation, again, is participating, but it doesn't cost any money to the church. Mm-hmm. So Lisa, that kind of leads into my next question. How do you pay for art for the church?
Well, our church has for years had a $400 worship art budget. And so we've been running on pretty much a shoestring, and we haven't actually always used that. We've gotten better about hitting that budget line in recent years, and have finally asked for a little bit larger budget after we produced for several years. But, you know, a lot of these projects can be done with things that people have at home, and our quilters and people who do fabric arts are more than willing to bring in a variety of fabrics that we can use in some of our art pieces. And, you know, there are people that are willing to donate here, there, or the other. I know we've done projects with paint chips. We've done, you know, where we've gone to a paint store and asked that they gave us paint chips, a little sample card so you can cut colors out of that. So there are a lot of different ways you can do art projects that are inexpensive. The other thing I would say, though, is if there's something that needs a piece that you don't have, don't try to make something that really wouldn't work. Because it will compromise your art piece. So there are times when you do need to spend and buy the piece you actually need.
There's a question from Austin. I love the idea of including liturgical art. However, I find myself stretched thin already. Any ideas to include something meaningful but not getting overwhelmed? Anybody on the panel want to answer that?
Well, I would say the first thing is just pick one season or just do one thing this year. I mean, it doesn't mean because you start doing it one Sunday that you have to have something up every Sunday. So just start with one. For us, it was starting Advent and Lent are very easy seasons to kind of come up with themes, since we already usually pick a theme for another reason for those seasons. So I would start with that, or choose Pentecost. I mean, it's red. Pick red, and you can find something to do that is red that will work for Pentecost. And then the other thing is finding one or two or three people in your congregation who might want to, I would say at least two, because people work off each other. So if you can get at least two people that might be willing to take a project, one-time project for Pentecost under their wing, that will get it started. And then you can go from there with expanding into inviting other people or maybe doing additional seasons.
Great, thank you. Ellen, do you need a professional artist to develop a liturgical art program?
No, for all the reasons that Lisa just mentioned. There's fabric artists and quilters. Well, quilters are sort of professional kind of people. So no. One thing that's always a trip hazard is sometimes people come up with pieces of art, something that Great Aunt Tilly gave them, and they really want to use it. You have to be very diplomatic and not hurt feelings, and because you do want a certain quality to liturgical art. The art, you know, you don't want the art to run the show either. You want it to be in keeping with everything else. So that's what I would say is just, that's a tough one, and you do have that happen sometimes. The other thing is when you're starting an arts program, just take baby steps. Like Lisa said, you can't just do the entire year once, and then there's going to be people who just are not happy with it. But you know, baby steps, and you'll get there.
There's a question: can children and youth be involved, and how?
Well, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. One thing that I think is important, though, is that it's not totally children and youth, because the message there is that art is lightweight, and then when you grow up, you don't do art anymore. I think it's very important to have adults involved, heavily involved. You know, some churches want to know if you have to use Christian art, whatever Christian art might be. Art is art. It stands on its own. So if there's a piece, something you want to use that seems appropriate, use it.
Right. Lisa, do you want to?
Yeah, I was going to say one project that we had an event several years, it's been more than 10 years ago now. We did a Holy Week Art Festival where we invited members of our congregation, both youth and adults, to submit a piece of art and a statement about the art that related somehow to their faith. And then we displayed them at the church during Holy Week. And we actually ended up leaving the display up for 3 or 4 weeks afterwards. But it was just a way to identify who might get involved. I will tell you, when you approach adults about doing this, you have to ask them in person. You cannot post it in the bulletin and expect that they're going to get excited and inspired. But you need to go to the people you know, or the people that you've seen who've done creative work before, and ask them to submit something. We had wood sculptures. We had a youth that did a lovely pencil drawing. We had people that did Mod Podge, if people still know what that is, which some people don't. So people did a variety of things. And the other thing we did was we had a workshop. We had a Saturday morning workshop where we brought a bunch of supplies so people could make something. So that got people into the idea of doing art that was then seen at church. And then we've invited some of those people to help us with some of the projects we've done in the sanctuary.
One of the activities or things we did at Central during the season of Lent, we found, I asked a couple of congregational members just to cut a branch that looked like a tree, and we planted that down in some rocks and sand in 2 different locations in the front of the sanctuary. And then we had a table with different colored ribbons that represented a different mood: peace, lament, joy, and a different color for each. And then during the prayers of the people would come forward. Especially the children and youth loved doing that activity. It was just tying the piece of ribbon on the branch of the tree, and then by Easter it was in full bloom. Somebody asked about the weight of the paper lace paper.
I don't know. If they're watercolor people, they know that there's a medium weight watercolor paper. It's probably on par with that, but the paper itself, when you hang it, is not going to weigh 2 pounds.
Right,
So,
very lightweight. We're getting close to the end. Ellen, I wondered if you wanted to share anything about art for the conference this summer?
Well, without giving things away.
Right. Well, that's
How
how about a hint?
a hint. I will tell you that what I'm working on right now seems huge, but when I get it up there in that Anderson Auditorium, it's not going to look so huge. But so just think about that when you come, and do come. It's not to be missed.
And there is
Yeah, I was going to say, you don't, we talked about whether you need artists on your liturgical art committees. Going to Montreat annually really can help with that, and participating in there. You can learn all kinds of wonderful skills that will come home and help you be very creative in doing a worship arts program at your own church.
And people may not be familiar with SIVA, Christians in Visual Arts. They have a newsletter that they print. They've got, David, you probably can tell more about it than I can.
Right. It's called SIVA, Christians in the Visual Arts. And they have rotating art exhibits that if you have an art gallery in your church or a space in your church that you can hang art, but it does cost to rent those. But they do have other things that is a good resource. I'll put that in the chat.
We didn't say much about galleries, but you don't have to be a museum to create an art gallery in your church. And there are rotating exhibits that are expensive, but there are also rotating exhibits that are less expensive. And you oftentimes can do an exhibit of church members. We found in Ann Arbor that we had some fabulous photographers. And one of our first, we did a virtual exhibit because it was during COVID, of photography of the members. And it was fabulous exhibit, and in fact cost nothing. And there are other ways to create a gallery space in your church, and start small and move into whatever you ultimately find the congregation is willing to support.
So how does one begin in a liturgical visual arts committee in the church?
I think the key is you find a couple people who are interested in leading that group and going to get excited about it. Then you send them to the Montreat Worship and Music Conference and get them some skills. And once they meet other people who are doing it, they'll realize it is possible. And then don't overwhelm them with expectations that something be done all the time. Start small.
Right. And incidentally, David and I are leading a course at Montreat Music and Worship about how do you start an arts ministry in your church. So be there.
We want to be respectful of people's time, and I see we're coming up on 2 o'clock here. I want to make a couple of announcements. First, I'd like to invite all of you to Pam's next Town Hall Forum, which will be next Thursday, February 3rd. Features Paul Basile and digs into his call to worship article, How Much Paper Does a Congregation Need? Which I think is a very timely topic. Also, certainly want to make sure that we encourage everyone to attend the Montreat Worship and Music Conferences this summer. The early bird registration deadline is coming up this week, I believe, next Monday. So please make sure that you do that. I'm going for the first time this year, so I'm very excited about that.
What if I'm in a small church and can't afford it? Are there scholarships available?
I believe there are.
Kelly just responded, yes.
Finally, I just want to ask everyone who has participated in this webinar today to please be on the lookout for the survey that we'll be sending you. The PAM Great Lakes region is trying to plan some things that will reach people where they need us. So we really appreciate your input on that survey. I see a question about, is the conference something for pastors as well? Yes, absolutely, everyone. I've been to 2 PAM conferences in Albuquerque, so I have had a little experience, even though I've not been to the mother of all of them at Montreat. And I think that they're fabulous. So please sign up.
And I just wanted to say to Debbie, since we're out of time for sharing, if she wants to contact me directly, I'll be happy to share the process of hanging the origami cranes.
Rigging, yes. Thank you all.
Go ahead, Ann.
I just want to thank everyone for participating today. Dave, Ellen, Lisa, Sandra, you've done a magnificent job for us, I think. And I think there's a lot here that we can unpack and take to work in our own congregations. Dave, any final words?
I was just going to say thank you to everybody and glad you joined us. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.